Everyone has a breaking point, and mine arrived the moment I realized my own family had already decided I'd never be more than the weak one. My name is Hazel, I'm 26, and this is the story of how being underestimated by the people closest to me nearly crushed me until it quietly changed everything. If you enjoy real-life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. I grew up in a coastal suburb just outside Newcastle, the kind of place where the streets are quiet, the neighbors are nosy, and everyone pretends everything's fine. From the outside, my family looked solid. Mom, Dad, my older brother Ryan, my younger sister Chloe, and me. We had Sunday roasts, beach days, and the usual backyard Barbies. People used to say we were lucky. What they didn't see was how clearly my place in the family had been decided. Ryan was the golden boy, confident, loud, good at foodie, the one Dad bragged about at work. Chloe was the baby, protected like glass, praised for breathing. And me? I was the quiet one, the emotional one, the one who couldn't handle pressure. That label stuck early and followed me everywhere. Anytime I spoke up, Mom would sigh and say, "Hazel, don't make a big deal out of it." When I got upset, Dad would shake his head. "You've always been sensitive." Ryan didn't even try to hide it. "You'd crack the second things got hard." At first, I laughed it off, played along, told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It chipped away at me bit by bit until I started believing them. School became my escape. I wasn't popular or loud, but I worked hard. Not because anyone expected me to succeed, no one did, but because studying was the one place I felt capable. In class, effort mattered more than personality. I liked that. After high school, Ryan stayed home, bounced between jobs, and somehow still got praised for figuring things out. Chloe had constant support for every emotional wobble. When I said I wanted to move out and study early childhood education, the room went quiet. "That sounds stressful for you," Mom said carefully. Dad frowned. "Are you sure you're up for it?" Ryan laughed. "Uni'll eat you alive, Hayes." I remember standing there, keys clenched in my hand, feeling stupid for expecting encouragement. I didn't know it then, but that moment would define everything that followed. I moved into a tiny share house with dodgy plumbing and a heater that barely worked. Money was tight. I worked nights at a childcare center and studied during the day. I was exhausted most of the time, but for the first time in my life, no one was telling me what I couldn't do. Still, every visit home dragged me back. "So, still struggling?" Dad would ask, already convinced. Mom worried aloud about my mental resilience. Ryan joked that I'd be back living with them any week now. I stopped correcting them. It felt pointless, like yelling into the wind. What no one talks about is what being underestimated does to you. At first, it shrinks you, makes you quieter, smaller, but over time, it can spark something else. A stubborn little fire that grows every time someone doubts you. By 25, I was working full-time, paying my own rent, and managing just fine. I didn't brag. I didn't announce my progress. Part of me wanted to see how long it would take before they noticed on their own. They never did. The night everything changed was a family dinner I almost skipped. I wish I could say I saw it coming. I didn't. All I knew was that by the end of that night, the version of Hazel they thought they knew would be gone for good. That dinner was meant to be casual, nothing heavy, just Mom insisting we all sit down together like old times, even though none of us really lived that way anymore. Ryan had invited his girlfriend Maddie, which already put him in a good mood. Chloe was there too, glued to her phone, barely listening. Dad poured the wine. Mom fussed over the roast, and I sat at the end of the table, quietly bracing myself like I always did. At first, it was harmless. Small talk, weather, work. Ryan talked about a new opportunity his mate had lined up for him, something vague but impressive sounding. Dad nodded like he was hearing a success story. Mom beamed. Then Mom turned to me. "So, Hazel, how's work going?" I hesitated. "Good, actually. I've been offered more responsibility, room leader stuff." Ryan snorted. That sounds full on for you. I forced a smile. I'm handling it, Dad raised an eyebrow. Just make sure you don't burn out. You've got a history of that. That stung, but I swallowed it. I always did. Dinner continued, but something felt off. Like everyone was circling a topic they hadn't quite landed on yet. Then Mum cleared her throat. We wanted to talk about something important, she said, folding her hands together. My stomach dropped. Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Yeah, family stuff. Mum looked at Dad, then back at me. Ryan's having a bit of a rough patch financially. I glanced at Ryan, surprised. He avoided my eyes. We thought, Dad continued, that as a family, we should help out. I nodded slowly. Okay. Ryan finally spoke. Mum said you've got some savings. The room went quiet. I blinked. What? You're working full-time, Mum said gently. No kids. No partner. You've always been good at putting money aside. Good at sacrificing, I thought. Ryan shrugged. I just need a bit of help. Alone, really. Until I'm back on my feet. How much? I asked, already feeling cornered. 10 grand, he said, like he was asking to borrow a jumper. I nearly laughed. $10,000. That was almost everything I had saved. Money I'd scraped together working nights, skipping holidays, saying no to myself again and again. I can't do that, I said quietly. Mum's face tightened. Hazel, don't be selfish. There it was. I'm not being selfish, I said, my voice shaking. I need that money. Dad sighed heavily. This is exactly what we mean. You panic. You shut down. Ryan rolled his eyes. Knew this would happen. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a clean break. I'm not weak because I won't bankroll your mistakes, I said. The table erupted. Mum gasped. Dad's chair scraped back. Ryan stood up. Excuse me. You've always assumed I'd just cave, I continued, my heart pounding. Because I'm the easy one. The quiet one. Maddie stared at me like she'd never seen this version of me before. Dad shook his head. Sit down, Hazel. No, I said, standing. I'm done sitting. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. For once, I worked for that money. No one helped me. No one even believed I could do it. Mum's eyes filled with tears. After everything we've done for you. That line hit hard, but it didn't break me this time. I'm grateful, I said, but I'm not your safety net. I left before anyone could stop me. Drove home with my chest tight and my thoughts racing. I cried when I got inside, curled up on my couch, wondering if I'd just blown up my family forever. I didn't know it then, but that night changed everything. I avoided my family for weeks after that dinner, not out of spite, but because I needed space to breathe without feeling like I was doing something wrong just by existing. At first, the silence was loud. No group chats, no check-in calls. Mum didn't send her usual just seeing how you are messages. Dad didn't text at all. Ryan unfollowed me on Instagram, which would have been funny if it didn't hurt. Chloe watched my stories but said nothing. Part of me expected relief. Instead, I felt unsettled, like I'd stepped off a path I'd been walking my whole life without knowing where it led. The guilt crept in slowly. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe 10 grand wasn't that much in the long run. Maybe I really was selfish. Those thoughts sat heavy in my chest during long workdays. I caught myself apologizing to coworkers for things that weren't my fault, slipping back into old habits. That scared me more than the family fallout. One afternoon, my supervisor Leanne pulled me aside. You all right, Hayes? You've been a bit distant. I hesitated, then surprised myself by telling her everything. Not every detail, but enough. She listened without interrupting, arms crossed, eyes steady. When I finished, she shook her head. Sounds like you finally said no, I laughed weakly. Feels like I committed a crime. That's because they're used to you saying yes, she said. Doesn't make you wrong. That stayed with me. A few days later, Mum finally called. I stared at my phone for a full minute before answering. Hello, her voice was tight. Your father and I are disappointed. Straight to it. No hello, no concern. I figured, I said. We raised you better than this, she continued. Family helps family. I agree, I said calmly. But family doesn't decide who I'm allowed to be. There was a pause. Then, Ryan's really struggling. I know, I replied. But that doesn't mean I'm responsible. Mom sighed like I was exhausting her. You've changed. I almost laughed. No, I just stopped shrinking. She didn't respond to that. After the call, I sat on my balcony watching the sun dip behind the houses, feeling strangely peaceful. Sad, yes, but steady, like I was finally standing on my own feet without waiting for permission. Ryan texted me that night. Ryan, didn't think you'd actually say no, me. I did. Ryan, Mum's shattered. Me, I'm not your solution. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. He never replied. Weeks turned into months. Life kept moving. Work got busier. I was officially promoted to room leader, something I celebrated quietly with takeaway and a glass of cheap wine. I didn't tell my family, not because I was hiding, but because I was done chasing validation. Chloe eventually reached out. We met for coffee near the beach. She looked nervous, stirring her drink. They think you've gone cold, she said. I shrugged. I've gone honest. She studied me. You seem different. I feel different. She nodded slowly. Ryan's still a mess, by the way. I know, I said gently. But that doesn't undo what I said, Chloe sighed. I don't think they ever realized how much pressure they put on you. That was the closest thing to acknowledgement I'd ever heard from anyone in my family. The real test came when Dad showed up at my place unannounced one Saturday morning. I opened the door and froze. He looked older, tired, smaller somehow. We need to talk, he said. I stepped aside, heart racing, wondering if this was where everything finally came crashing down or finally changed for good. Dad sat stiffly on my couch, hands clasped together like he was waiting for a verdict. The flat felt smaller with him in it, like it used to when I was a kid, and his silence carried more weight than words. I won't stay long, he said, eyes scanning the room. Just wanted to clear the air, I nodded, sitting opposite him. My heart was thumping, but I kept my voice steady. All right. He took a breath. Your mom's been taking this hard. I didn't respond. I'd learned that jumping into fast only dragged me back into old patterns. She feels like you've shut us out, he continued. Like you don't care anymore. That's not true, I said calmly. I care. I just don't want to be treated like the family backup plan, he frowned. That's not fair, isn't it? I asked. You all decided I was fragile years ago. Everything I do gets filtered through that. Dad leaned back, rubbing his temples. You've always been sensitive, Hazel. There it was again. The word that had followed me my whole life. I'm sensitive because I pay attention, I said. That doesn't make me weak. He looked at me properly then, like he was seeing me for the first time. Not his quiet daughter, not the easy one, just me. Ryan's situation is serious, he said after a pause. He's in debt, bad debt. I felt a flicker of sympathy, quickly followed by frustration. I'm sorry he's struggling. I really am. But you can't keep expecting me to fix things just because I don't push back. Dad sighed. We didn't think you'd cope well with conflict. I almost laughed. I've been coping with it my whole life. You just never noticed. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable this time, just honest. Finally, he said, your mom and I thought helping Ryan would be easier if it came from you. That's exactly the problem, I replied. You thought I'd be easier. He didn't argue. When he stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. You've done well for yourself, he said quietly. I suppose. I didn't expect that. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. After he left, I sat there for a long time, letting the conversation sink in. I felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I'd finally said what needed to be said without falling apart. A week later, Mom called again. This time, her voice was softer. We may have pushed you too hard, she admitted. Or, not in the right ways. It was clumsy, imperfect, but it mattered. Ryan never apologized. Instead, I heard through Chloe that he'd moved back home. Dad was helping him sort out his finances. Slowly, properly, without my savings on the line. Life carried on. I settled into my role at work, gained confidence, started trusting my own decisions. I even enrolled in an extra qualification, something I would have talked myself out of before. One night, standing in front of the mirror, I realized something strange. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt solid, like whatever came next, I could handle it. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for my family to tell me who I was allowed to be. The real victory wasn't proving them wrong. It was no longer needing to. The next time we were all in the same room, it wasn't planned or dramatic. It just happened. Chloe invited everyone to her birthday lunch at a pub near the water. Neutral ground, easy exit. I almost didn't go, but something in me wanted to see how it would feel now, standing there as the version of myself I'd fought to become. Ryan showed up late, same as always. Mum fussed. Dad ordered drinks. The usual rhythm, but it felt different. Quieter, like everyone was aware that the old rules no longer applied. Ryan barely looked at me at first. When he did, there was no sarcasm, no smirk, just awkwardness. "Hey," he said. "Didn't think you'd come." "Yeah," I replied. "Neither did I." We sat at opposite ends of the table. No tension, no warmth either, just distance. And honestly, I was okay with that. Mum tried to steer conversation into safe territory. Chloe's job, the weather, some neighbor drama. Dad listened more than he spoke. Every now and then, I caught him watching me, like he was recalibrating something in his head. Halfway through lunch, Ryan cleared his throat. "Hazel, about before the money thing." The table went silent. "I shouldn't have assumed," he said, eyes fixed on his glass. "That's on me." It wasn't a full apology, but it wasn't nothing. "Thanks," I said. "That means something." He nodded once. That was it. Later, as we were leaving, Mum hugged me tighter than usual. "You seem stronger," she said softly. I smiled. I always was. Driving home, windows down, salt in the air, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Not because everything was perfect, but because I wasn't carrying the weight alone anymore. Over the next few months, life settled into something steady. I kept growing at work, took on mentoring, spoke up more, trusted myself. I stopped shrinking to keep others comfortable. Funny thing is, the world didn't fall apart when I did that. I ran into people from my past who were shocked by the confidence in my voice. Even Ryan asked for advice once. Not money, actual advice. I gave it freely, without resentment. One night, Chloe rang me, laughing. "Mum just told someone you're the resilient one now." I laughed too. About time. Looking back, I realized how dangerous that weak one label was. Not because it described me, but because I almost let it define me. Family opinions cut deeper than anyone else's. They shape the way you see yourself long before you're old enough to question them. But here's what I learned. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it looks like saying no when your voice is shaking. Sometimes it's walking away without slamming doors. Sometimes it's choosing yourself quietly, over and over again. My family didn't suddenly change overnight, but they adjusted, because I did. And the truth is, proving them wrong was never the point. The real win was finally believing myself. Family should be a place where you grow, not a box you're forced to fit into. And once I stepped out of that box, I didn't just survive. I built a life I was proud of.